Hello, and welcome to this episode of Own the Journey, where we get to speak with incredible people from all around the world. And today we have a special guest, and I'm going to ask you to help me with your name. And it's a big, long, crazy name.
It's Dami Odunewu.
Dami Odunewu, okay. Well, thank you for being with us. You've got quite the story, so I'm excited to talk with you.
Thank you.
So for those that haven't had a chance to know a little bit about your history, talk to us about your trip from Nigeria, how you ended up here in the U.S., and some of the cool things that you've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, I spent 20 years of my life in Nigeria, and in I believe it was 2006, I started really just exploring the idea of relocating to the U.S. as an international student to go to med school. My dream was, just go to med school and, become a surgeon and all that. And so that was the dream. I had been planning on that. And then out of the blues, I had a family friend who I'm not sure how many people know about the American Visa Lottery, and he decided to submit about 20 names. And so he came to me and was like, well, I included your name in this submission. And I said, it's a complete waste of time. It never works. That was my response. Well, out of 20 people, I got selected by the USCIS, and I got a letter in the mail saying, congratulations, you're on your way to becoming an American citizen. So I didn't have to apply to be an international student or anything. I just completed the process, and once you get the immigrant visa, they give you 6 months to move. And I was 20, never been outside Lagos, which was where I lived at the time because my mom was overprotective. And then here I was 20, and she had to let me come to the U.S. by myself. Oh my goodness. Yep. That's quite a story. How I ended up in the country.
Well, congratulations, and thanks for joining us here in the U.S.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So talk to us just a little bit about your companies and organization. So you started off, companies. Companies. You've got a lot going on. So you started off in healthcare and focusing in that arena, and then you made your way into a technology company that specializes in helping people kind of obsolete resumes and do cool things with it. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start with Divine Missions Health Center.
Okay.
Because that's really where it all began for me. 2007, I had gotten to this point, even though I was young, I was 19, and I really just wanted to know what I was going to spend my life doing. I spent a few months just pondering that. And one day I was sitting in my living room in Nigeria, and I remember just getting this vision. It was like a movie, and I could see myself doing medical missions.
Wow.
And I, grabbed my computer and I started to make notes of everything that I was seeing. But then at the end of it, I said, well, this is insane, because how are you supposed to accomplish any of this from Nigeria, right? And so that's really when I started to dig even deeper into moving to the U.S. because I knew I had to be in an environment where I would be able to make that happen. And then after that was when I found out that I had won the visa lottery. And so it was almost as if God was opening the door for me to be able to do the work that He had called me to do. And so I moved to the U.S., and you would think that I would go right to work, but there was so much that needed to be done. I needed to go to school. But along with that vision, I had a really big ambition. I was like, well, I want to do medical missions, but also I wanted to make sure I went to med school. And so I was a pre-med major. I did biomedical engineering. And then after about 2 years into that program, I was like, no, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, you're on the wrong path. Your calling in medical missions has nothing to do with being hands-on. You need to be on the admin side of everything that's happening, so that you can coordinate this and you can make this happen. So I literally had to drop my ambition to go to med school.
Wow.
Just midway. Lost some years, but honestly, I don't even consider it a waste at all.
Sure.
Because it helped me to get to that point where I was like, now I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so from some of the things that you all have learned, I ended up making that switch, deciding I wanted to do health communications. There were only 5 schools in the U.S. that had that program at that point because it was fairly new. Missouri State was one of them. And so I lived in Maryland at the time, and so I moved over here to complete my bachelor's in health communication. It was very easily the best move that I made for myself, or that I could have made, because I would be in my class and literally be getting visions in class.
Yeah, wow.
And that's how I knew I was, in the right spot and doing the right thing. And I honestly can't explain the feeling, but it was the best.
Yeah.
It just I never once had to sit back and question that move, because a lot of what I was seeing in my vision was so tangible. It was like, here's how you apply what you're learning, and this is how this plays out in the real world. And it was just amazing.
Yeah, what a remarkable story. So a couple of different things there. The courage to drop what you were doing after 2 years and totally pivot. That's not a small thing. What? No. But would you some people would say in a circumstance like that, it's courage, and some would say it was just a calling. Would you say that's what it was for you, or was it a little bit of both?
It was both, and I think on the courage aspect, it was really, I'm not sure how exposed you are to Nigerian families.
I'm not.
The Nigerian family, the typical Nigerian family consists of doctors, lawyers, what's the third one? Architects. They typically will go for the typical high reputation type job, and if you're not any of that, you're a disgrace to the family.
Oh wow.
and so for me, when I made that switch, my dad, who is now late, we lost him earlier this year, but his response was, well, I'll support you, whatever your decision is,
Oh, that's
but
amazing.
it's the Nigerian family's pride to be able to say, because you have to understand, our country is very much, a lot of people live in poverty, and when you can say that my child is this, doctor and all of that, it's huge. And so my mom was really looking forward to being able to say that. And then I turn around and I say, well, I'm not going to med school. And so she never accepted it. Even after she moved here to help me with my son, she's lived with me now for 5 years. She would ask me constantly, oh, well, so what do you do at the hospital again? And it would be her way of trying to make sense of the path that I chose. And it was also having to explain to people who already, in my community knew that I was going to med school, and having to say, oh, this is why. It just, no matter what I said, it just wasn't logical for them.
Right.
Because the expectation was that you were going to come out with this elaborate, degree and become Dr. Dami. I'm like, who cares? I just want to be fulfilled in life.
Well, it really was courage then, because you're talking about challenges within the family dynamics and social statuses in your community. That's a lot. And so, well, thanks for having the courage to do that. Okay, so, and then moving on, health communications, that's something that a lot of people don't really know what it is. So explain that to us just a little bit. So
at the time I got my degree, health communications was very heavily focused on provider-patient interaction. It really it's really a patient-centered approach is what health communication focuses on. It looks at what are the needs of the patient, how do we individualize in the way we approach the needs of patients and not just generalize. And I'll give a good example. I was in a meeting several months ago. It was a health disparities meeting in town, and someone had said, well, part of what we need to do is teach patients to advocate for themselves. And it sounded good on the surface, but the reality is there are some cultures that don't care about advocating for themselves, and you have to take them into consideration. And so that's sort of what health communication focuses on, is how do we look at the individual patient and say, what is their need? How do we tailor the way that we care for them to their need, their culture, who they are as a person, and not assume for them? And so that's really the easy way to summarize what health communication is. Just provide a patient interaction and patient-centered, from a patient-centered approach.
Well, and hats off, I'll do a little plug for our local college here. So Missouri State having a degree like that, what made you decide this community in Missouri State was the right place to come to pursue that?
Well, as I said, there were only 5 schools,
Yeah.
right? There was James Madison in Virginia, which was closest to me at the time, but it was really expensive. And then there was Ohio State, Kent in Texas, and then Missouri State. There was one more, I can't remember. And when I started to approach and reach out to the admissions department, it was just the intentionality and like just the way that they responded. And my program advisor, she video called me 3 times just to show me like the process. Kelly Wood, I should say her name because we're still friends till today.
That's awesome.
She took the time to like give me a call, get on a Zoom with me. Actually, it was Skype back then. She got on there with me and we made sure I had all the information I needed. I just didn't feel like I was in the dark figuring things out. And that really helped me make that decision.
The advocacy that you love doing now, she was doing for you to help you find the school. Yeah, that's amazing. And so from health communications, and then you have blossomed into some other areas of the world as well. But along the way, you dealt with some challenges where people treated you differently, and you had to kind of endure that. Talk to us a little bit about how you had to fight through that, overcome that, and you had to use your own life experiences to kind of navigate through some tough times.
Absolutely. And I will say initially when a lot of the microaggressions and a lot of the not so great treatment I was receiving all of those, when that was happening, I don't know that I had all the tools that I needed to be able to kind of navigate that in the moment. And I say that because after I accepted my first job at Cox Health, I was in a really large department as a manager, and I had 33 direct reports.
Wow.
2 of them were Romanians, 2 were Asians. I had 1 Black employee, and then it was about 28 or so white employees, which that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just, now in hindsight, what I would have called microaggression back then was just a group of people lacking what they needed to have those important interactions to work together. It's, how much exposure do they have to people from my culture? How much exposure do I have working with someone who was raised in Springfield, Missouri? I didn't have any exposure. In fact, when I was moving here, a lot of my family and friends in Maryland thought I was crazy. Like, you don't even know anybody there. Why are you going there?
Right.
But in the moment when all of that was happening, it's just to kind of put things into perspective. I'm driving into work one day. I get a call from my director running life at Cox Health at the time. And, I think he's still there. Running calls me and he says, "Hey, can you stop by my office when you get here?" Yeah, sure. I get to work, and we'd never really had that. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it could be good or bad. You just never know.
Sure.
I walk into his office, and the first thing he says is, "I want to first say how much I'm disappointed that we're still having to deal with this in our community." And what he meant was the discrimination. So he could see through all of it, and he made sure to perfects our conversation so that I would know that he was on my side.
That's amazing.
And then he pulled out the full page of complaints that some people from our team had submitted to HR. And we went over each one, and he said, we're going to have to play their game. We're going to have to come up with a plan and try to deal with this as best as we could. I don't know if I would have been able to deal with it if I didn't have his backing. And that's just the truth, because going, even with that, I remember driving home that night in tears, ready to run back to Maryland. I was like, I'm done. I don't want to be in Springfield. They don't want me here. And I grabbed my computer and I'm looking at jobs in Maryland. And then the next minute, it's like, you know what? If they're too upset, they should go get my degree and come take the job from me. They have to deal with me, or they have to deal with me. That's all they got. I don't, And then I went back to work the next day and the following day and the day after that. And, and every time I would see the shock on some of their faces, and I had someone come to me, one of my employees, she walked up to me when I eventually made the transition to Children's Miracle Network. She said, this was about 1.5 years into the job, and she said, I just wanted to say, I don't know how you went past that phase. When all of that was happening, I honestly thought you were gonna just disappear and we wouldn't see you anymore, but somehow you kept coming back. And I think what that did for me was it really gave me the opportunity during that 1.5 year period to force myself to learn, how do I interact with these people that I've never been in front of? And, it's kind of a setup. You hear employers talk about diversifying the workforce. You want to bring all these new people in, but then neither party has an exposure to talking or interacting with each other. And then you're like, here, figure it out, work together. And what happens is where they're supposed to be working together, there's so much miscommunication, there's a lot of, just gesture differences and things that get misunderstood. And, 6 months down the line, you have an employee that's quitting, and you wonder why your turnover rates are high. So really, I think a lot of that is what informed even the work that I do now with Purpose Connect and with a lot of the diversity focused activities that we're doing.
I love that. What I heard in all of that's amazing to me is that when you had the challenges where people were treating you less than ideal, I'll say, you took the first leadership step forward and you showed empathy and determination, and so you gave tolerance to them, knowing that they had some challenges to overcome, and you just persevered and worked through it.
Well, I don't know that it was that smooth.
It may not have felt that smooth at the time, but I think there's a lesson in there. What advice would you give to someone who's dealing with a diverse workforce, who just where those understandings don't exist between the different cultures and the backgrounds? And you even mentioned gestures, which is something I wouldn't have thought of. What advice would you give?
Give the benefit of the doubt, because I feel like we live in a society where we're so quick to think that someone's against us. And, someone says something out of ignorance or just really ignorance. And we walk away feeling a certain way, but maybe we share it with somebody else and that person says, oh, there's no reason they should treat you that way. Well, we're not really sure what's happening on the other party's end. And, I would even dare to argue that the majority of people aren't really setting out to do this.
Have conflict.
They're not. It's just, there are a few ridiculous people who are like, I don't like you, I'm going to let you know I don't like you. But that's not the majority of people. And I think that anyone who finds themselves for us as immigrants, we're constantly in that position. I'm talking about the gestures and, in my culture, we don't shake hands of people who are older than us. We don't make eye contact because all of those things are disrespectful. So when I first came in the American professional setting and people are walking up to me and they're ready to shake my hands, heck, we don't even call people by their names. Like, I wouldn't dare to call you by your name if you were Nigerian. You know,
really?
Yeah, I would not, because it would be disrespectful. And so that, I mean, those are some of the things that people don't think about for us immigrants coming into an environment where everything is done differently. And then we're having to like take the burden of learning those things by ourselves and figuring, well, you have to be comfortable shaking that person's hand, that older woman's hand, or that older gentleman's hand, or you have to be comfortable looking people in the eye, you know. So you walk away feeling awkward because you're avoiding eye contact, or you're not really, initially I wasn't really shaking people's hands, and then one day somebody was like, oh, people might think you're not confident. Like, oh my gosh, how different things could mean different, you know, things could mean different things to different people. And then the person quits because one person thinks, oh my gosh, Dami's weird. I don't know why she behaves like that. I don't know why she's always moving her hands when she talks. I'm like, oh, sorry. That's just, you know, most Nigerians are like in your face type of people. You know? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I heard in all of that is when we have those differences, courageous conversations is something that we talk about. So just sitting down in a non-confrontational way and just asking people, like, it's okay to be different but equal, and have really good conversations about those things so that you can gain that understanding that sometimes is lacking.
Yeah, my recommendation is always ask the big question, what do I need to know in having a conversation with someone from Nigeria? What do I need to know in having a conversation with, you know, someone from China? Wherever it is, just ask people, and then in return we do the same. You know, we ask the same questions. What do I need to know? And when I worked at the hospital, we even got in a space where when they would say something or use a term and I wasn't familiar with it, I would be like, well, what does that mean? And then they'll tell me, and they might laugh at me, but it was all jokes, you know. And one time someone had said, stop being a CC, and I was like, what does that mean? And she told me. And then literally a few hours later, she's griping about something, and so I look at her and I'm like, stop being a CC. So everyone burst out laughing because I immediately turned around and used what I learned. You know, but that's the kind of atmosphere that we have an opportunity to build just across our workforce in general, if we're really serious about bringing diversity into our community, that is.
Yeah, well, and we need to. I mean, we need it for a lot of different reasons. What you said reminds me of the Ted Lasso scene. I don't know if you've seen it, but he says, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's transition. You decided to be a tech entrepreneur on top of everything else and trying to champion these causes. So talk to us about that journey.
Absolutely. So in between healthcare and the tech company, I had started to discover while I was working at the hospital, people just didn't want to be at work. Most people didn't want to be at work. They kind of just had to because they needed the income and all of that. And I had shared just how much peace I had from just knowing what I was going to spend my life doing. And so to come into the hospital system, never questioning that, knowing I wanted to be there, it was very heartbreaking for me to just see, you know, a different experience for others. And you could tell that because, you know, of the way they approach their work. You could tell that because of the way that, you know, people were against each other with the conflicts and with this, you know, just there were just things that will happen. And in my mind, I'm like, if you're here for a clear purpose, you wouldn't really waste your time being against people. You would want the people you work with on your side, right? You know, because you can only do so much by yourself, right? And so that sort of inspired me to start helping individuals discover themselves so that they can find fulfillment in the work that they did. And so that's where Dami was created. And for roughly about 5 years, even now I still do some one-on-ones because they trickle in even without the promotions. I would get a call and be like, oh, we found you on Google, but I started to help my clients discover themselves, and I would help them craft a career strategy and help them develop sort of a 3 to 5 vision, and just help them get to that point of saying, I know that my over 60 years of working in this life, because a lot of us spend over 60. People retire rather around 60 something, and
60
so
to 70,
yes, between 60 70, and most people start working in their teenage years. Why would I want to spend that chunk of my life, in a place that I don't want to be,
right?
And so I would help them craft a career strategy. And in some cases, they will be making a transition because they'll come to the realization of, oh, I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I need to make a switch. So along with that came the reality of resume formatting and all of those different things, because, no one really trains people on how to format their resume, right? And a lot of that was job seekers are like, oh, I want to make my resume look really nice and beautiful and all that. Well, my approach, and one of my very good friends who kind of lives between London and Oman, she always says, your resume needs to be boring looking, but not boring sounding. And most job seekers don't know that. They're now with Canva tools and all of that, it makes it even worse. And so they're making their resume really beautiful, but then what they're really doing is they're hindering themselves from getting through the applicant tracking system. Because most of the applicant tracking systems will screen you out if you have things like pictures, colors, lines, icons, and all of those different things on your resume. Essentially, if your resume is beautiful, you're probably stuck in the ATS system and not getting in front of the hiring person. So what I originally wanted to do with Purpose Connect back in July 2018, when the idea first popped up in my head, was how do we just eliminate the resume so that people are not burdened with having to get that piece right. Like if you're good, if you have the expertise, if there's alignment of values and all of those, good stuff, let's just get you in front of the hiring person. And so that's what informed our mission of making hiring more human. It's, I love that. Beyond what and the ridiculous thing about resumes is the hiring person only spends an average of 6 seconds looking at it. So you do all this work and you have a challenge getting through, and if you eventually get through, the hiring person is not really spending a lot of time looking at your resume and seeing, what makes you unique, what makes you, the right person for the job. They're, in fact, overwhelmed with having so many applicants who maybe their resumes look just like yours because they're also trying to make it look beautiful, and so that's really where it all began from. It was, let's eliminate the resume. And then as I kind of went deeper into the idea and creation, I started to realize there needs to be a different way to get people in front of employers, which is where I ended up developing the algorithm, and it's points-based, and they need to score at least a 70% in order to get in front of the hiring person.
Oh, that's amazing. So talk to me a little bit about the technology that you built in Purpose Connect. You fill out, I'm assuming
you fill out a profile. So it's a standard profile that replaces the resume, which essentially means for the job seeker, they don't always have to complete a form if there's a new job presented to them. So it's a matching platform. Once you have your profile, we essentially look at it's points driven, and so all of your must-haves in terms of your requirements. If you have preferred, those will bear lower points, and then on and on that way. And they need to score at least a 70% in order for you to get a prompt that says you've got a match.
Nice. And then from there, the job seeker can just upload it to an application system?
Well, they submit it, on the platform. So they submit their profile. Their profile stays the same. So right now, what we have is more of a testing platform, and so we're going to open the MVP in the fall.
Oh, nice.
And then essentially, they're going to be able to see what they're going to be able to access their profile. They're going to be able to go in and see all the jobs that they've been matched with. And at no point in time do they get matched with more than 5 jobs. Same thing for the employer, because if someone's truly qualified based on the algorithm, you don't need to look at 20 of them.
Right.
You need to look at less. You need to see everything that they bring to the table,
I love that.
not 6% or tiny portion of them because you're too busy looking at everybody else.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talk to us about how hard, difficult, fun, challenging it was to navigate from health communications to working with, I assume, some developers and developing algorithms and fundraising. Did you do some fundraising along the way?
We are currently
fundraising. Okay, so talk to us about the whole thing.
So I have zero tech experience.
Yeah.
So that was the first. Thing, and I remember going, "You're crazy. Why would you want to do this? Like, you don't even know what you're doing." I just knew I had this whole idea in my head, and then in 2021, I encountered a friend of mine who was at the time based out of North Carolina. And he worked for a development company that I ended up hiring to build the requirements. And so we had several months. I met him, I think, March 21. And when we met, we weren't even talking business. It was just more, let's just, we're just getting to know each other, what we both do. And then as time went on, I was like, Ivan's probably a good one to start talking about my flow charts and about everything that I've been working on, the algorithms and all that. Because between 2018 and 2021, I did take a year off where I didn't do anything about my idea, because right after I got the idea, I unfortunately went through a divorce, and I was like chaotic. Yeah. So I took a year off and then went back to working on it 2020. And that's when I put the initial flow chart together with the help of a friend of mine in Oklahoma, and then I started to work on the algorithm and how the point system would work. And so by the time Ivan and I started working together, I already had a lot of just stuff that I'd been putting together and trying to make sense of this crazy idea. And so when he brought the team on board, they just ran with what I had, and we spent about 3 months or so just working on the requirements. And then once we finished with that, we went right into development, which was a whole different ordeal because Ivan's team was contracted. I started to find out how much more expensive it was to develop a software. And I was like, what did you sign up for? Because you're thinking, give or take, I might, invest maybe just my personal funds, 10 grand, maybe not more. So far, let me tell you, I've spent so far we've raised about $91,000 between, we had 2 private investors, and then I'm the largest investor. And so we raised about $91,000, but even that, you're still paying for development, and they were contracted. And so going into the end of last year, I was like, this is not sustainable because we weren't really raising any venture capital. that's a whole different story. But we weren't really raising money through venture capitals. We were raising private money, but even that was hard because, you know, who wants to take the risk on this product that they're not really sure is going to survive, right? Or is going to make it. And so towards the end of last year, I knew something needed to change. I knew I needed to find a different way to keep development going. And that's when we kind of got rid of the contractors. I brought a co-founder on that's now leading all things tech. And he's based out of Dallas. And then we have a founding engineer. And then we interviewed one person last week. And he has a second interview with my co-founder, and then we might bring him on, and so that will make up 3 people that are internal on the tech team. And then we have a business development person, and then we have an admin person. So we have a team of 6 right now. But I really had to, on the development side, I had to look at things beyond, oh, I need to pay them for this. I started approaching people about, would you do this for equity, or would you do this for part payment, part equity? Because that's you know, that's really the way that you can eliminate those crazy development costs.
Well, I'll say I've been in the tech space for a long time, and a lot of people don't know how hard it is to get a business going, and so you're kind of in the grind of it all. But I think it's easy to see that you've got the vision and you've got the determination in order to make it happen, the courage. I mean, it takes a lot to get out there and make it happen. So in the midst of all this, you're still working on your core mission work and helping people and navigating through those challenges and continuing now a nonprofit that you have established as well.
Yeah. So the other side of that was I also had a day job that was another healthcare nonprofit. And up until March, I was working about 80 hours a week between the business and work. And then in March, it just, early this year, it just didn't make any sense to keep pulling all the hours. And I decided I needed to step away from the day job so I could really focus. And then the other part of the venture, you know, a lot of the accelerators and venture capitals and all that stuff is, when you have a day job as a founder, they don't take you seriously. And so it was sort of the sacrifice that I had to make also, so I could, you know, I could show that I'm all in. And I'm not like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I've made that transition. And then on the medical mission side of things, I'm doing that more, about 1 trip or 2 a year. I'm actually taking a team to Honduras in July.
Wow.
And so that's still on. We're still working year-round with hospitals in Nigeria, where the healthcare system is still prepaid. And if you don't pay, you're not getting treated. And so we still have a year-round emergency patient assistance program that we're helping patients with. And then we also are starting this new minorities pregnant women program in Missouri, across Southwest Missouri. And so there's that component that's still going. But we have a team of volunteers and all that kind of helps to make that manageable, I would say, while I'm doing the business side.
The business side. But the story that I understood, sometimes, I mean, it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference in Nigeria and some of the other areas around the world.
No, it does not take a lot.
Life-changing procedures for less than $100? Yeah, talk to us about how that works. And you know, I'm not familiar with the prepaid environment, so learning about that, I was shocked that something that simple could be life and death for someone.
It's been that way. You know, I think for me, my whole passion about providing access to healthcare started when I was 14. I had a family friend who was 20 at the time, and he had sickle cell anemia, needed blood, and they wouldn't administer blood until his mom paid. And So she leaves him at the hospital, goes in search of funding. She comes back, he's gone.
Oh.
And I remember just as a 14-year-old, I just couldn't wrap my mind around why someone would have to lose their lives, because healthcare is a right, it's not a privilege. And I saw that even with my dad. When my dad he choked on something in January, got a call about 1:30 in the morning, and we're getting him to the hospital, and every time we got somewhere, or every time they needed to treat him, they would demand payment. So I was wiring funds from here to cover the payment so they would treat my dad.
That's unbelievable.
And, we ended up losing him within hours of that, They even ran out of oxygen and needed to get more. Well, we don't have oxygen, you need to pay for it so we can get more. And I'm calling my friend who owns a pharmacy in Nigeria, and I'm going, get me oxygen, can you get it to the hospital? And that's just, unfortunately, the situation there. And like you said, it really doesn't cost much. An average surgery there would be less than $100. Sometimes, or most times, about $50, $60. And you have, in fact, we had a man back in, I think it was end of February, early March, who had breathing problems, and we had gotten contacted, and they needed to treat him and then get him stabilized and get him to another hospital. And so we approved it, and literally after we approved it, he died. Because they wouldn't touch him before they got the money. Yeah,
that's unbelievable.
So it makes me mad all the time, but it's the reality. In Nigeria, in places like Honduras, really a lot of third world countries. That's what they have to deal with.
Well, on the flip side, tell us one of your favorite stories about where you've been able to save the day and do some amazing work, because I know that's what you are in it for.
Yeah, absolutely. It was our first year, 2014. So I had the vision 2007. We didn't launch until 2014. And August 2014, we went on our first medical missions trip to Nigeria. It was right in the middle of Ebola. Everybody thought I was crazy. And I was like, well, we're going. We're going to be covered. We're good. We're going to be protected. And I was like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe Ebola kills me. I would die fulfilling my purpose. And so we went to, 2 weeks before we went to Nigeria. This was our first year. We were very much still trying to connect with resources and find the best way to do this work. And we were still in need of so many supplies, and we weren't really getting supplies donated. We weren't raising a lot of money, but about 2 weeks to the time, I got on Amazon looking to purchase some blood pressure cuffs and machines and stethoscopes and all that. And there was a company, it was based out of California, and MDF Instruments, and I had a question about their blood pressure cuffs, because we were going to a community of 3,000 residents. It was a destitute community, but they also had a lot of children in that community. So I reached out via email, because Amazon has a thing where you contact the
seller.
So I did, wanting to find out some things about the blood pressure cuffs, and I got a response back saying, did you say this was for an outreach? We might be able to donate that. And I was like, I thought they were just blabbing. And within a matter of 24 hours, I got on the phone with their missions person, and they ended up donating, my goodness, over $3,000 worth of supplies. And we didn't have to pay for it. We only paid the shipping, I remember. And I was in shock. I was like, honestly, my most, maybe because it was the first year, I think that one incident really gave me the confidence of, you can do this.
Yes.
You know, it's not as long as you're willing to give it yourself, everything else will follow.
I love that.
It was good.
Yeah. And so when you went on the trip, you obviously...
Oh, we didn't get Ebola.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to Lagos, and we were working with volunteers from 3 other hospitals. And at the time I arrived Lagos, Nigeria, a lot of the volunteers were starting to get like weary about doing the work that week, because it was all, you know, Ebola was like spiking up, and it was all the crazy stuff happening. So I spent the first few days visiting the hospitals and trying to convince the volunteers. We had about 70 of them that year. And I spent my first few days really just convincing them not to drop out.
Wow.
Not to drop out. And I was like, we've got protective, you know, wear and all of that, and you're covered, you're not gonna catch Ebola, and, you know, and we ended up with 64 volunteers.
So you still did really well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It made a big difference, I'm sure.
We really did, and we still work some with that community, and in fact, we just now got an affiliation with the closest hospital to that community, so that if they needed treatment, they're able to go, and they automatically get approved because they're from that community.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So how do you get the word out about something like this? I mean, it's so meaningful, but there's so many distractions in the world and people asking for donations. So how do you get the word out and help people to know about what you guys are doing?
Honestly, I don't know if it's so much how we get the word out, but really helping people to see the realities that this, you know, different third world, because we've been to Honduras as well. This would be my second time going to Honduras. And the challenge that we face in getting the word out is here locally, while it's so beautiful to see how we're so much about how do we grow our community, how do we make our community better, in the same sense, I think we're very much detached from what's happening outside here. And it takes a lot more to really help people see. I mean, the majority of our supporters are not from here. And that's because, you know, people are very local minded here, and that's good. But sometimes we have to be able to like really look beyond how does this benefit us.
Right.
And look at the realities. My first year working as a medical missionary, I met a 6-year-old girl who lived in that destitute community. Both parents were disabled, and she didn't go to school. This girl was the breadwinner. She cooked, and she was selling to feed her family, and they only had 1 meal a day. And both parents disabled. They didn't have wheelchairs. I mean, literally, if you're disabled in Nigeria and you don't have a way to purchase a wheelchair, you're crawling. And that's your reality, because nobody's gonna step in. And so she ends up being the one at 6, when she's supposed to be a child, feeding her family, her mom and dad. And when I asked how much she made, at the time, it was 1,000 naira, which was roughly at the time about $6. Now 1,000 naira is $1 and some cents because of the difference in currency value. And so a child cannot be a child because they're trying to make $6, you know, a week, just so they can feed their family, and they only have 1 meal.
Wow.
You know, and so in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, yes, yay, I'm doing a lot of community work too, but I wish that our community would be a lot more open to the idea of it's that curiosity. Find out what's happening outside the comfort of what we know, and see how we, you know, maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea, you know, but I was born in it, I saw it, you know, it's always going to be there.
Yeah, that's amazing work. Well, on top of everything else, you're a mom. Keeping up with that. So how are you balancing all of these things you talked about?
A 5-year-old that feels like 3 kids.
Yeah. I know that feeling. Yeah.
Well, so my mom lives with me. She moved here at the end of, she first visited at the end of 2017 when I was almost due. I had him early 2018. In my culture, grandma actually takes care of the grandbaby.
Okay.
So by default, my mom knew she needed to come here right as I was getting ready to have him. And then she was with us for 5 months. She went back. And then when his dad and I ended up going through our divorce, he had just turned 1. And once I called my mom and said, hey, it's happening, I'm leaving. She's like, great, I'm gonna move over, because they've been trying to get me to leave the marriage. It was not a healthy situation. So she's lived here ever since. I mean, almost 5 years now. She's been here helping. So usually when she's visiting, she goes to Nigeria about once every year, for about 2 months, maybe 3. That's when I feel it the most, because with everything else that I have going on, and he's autistic, and so there's that piece as well. Very high energy, so he keeps me going, and most days I really don't have work time in the evenings until he's gone to bed, and then I can work until midnight, maybe 1
until you crash.
Until I crash. I'm like, when he goes to bed, I have time to work. But you just, I don't know if I have the right recipe for raising a child and doing as much as I do. And sometimes I do feel guilty too, because he's gotten to where now he's very aware of how much I work. And there have been a few times there where he's been like, no more working, mommy. And the first time he said that, I was like, oh, I must really be working too much. And I shut my computer, but honestly, you just do the best that you can, and you just do the best that you can. Just find a way.
Just one foot in front of the other. It sounds like that's how you operate. Yeah. So as we wrap up, I know that you've received lots of advice over the years. I always like to ask people, what's the best advice that you've ever received?
I would say in recent times, the best advice that I received was just get out and meet people. When you're doing something that is worth sharing, that is worth telling people about, I'm such a big introvert, and most people don't know that, because when I talk, I really talk. And when I'm in front of a group, I do what I need to, and then I lose my energy, and then I'm like, okay, let's get the energy back. And so along with that came a lot of, for me, it was just that need to kind of guard my socialization time. And this person told me a couple years ago, he was like, you just need to just get out and meet people. Give yourself the chance of just telling your story. And I took that, and honestly, it was as if my professional life took a 360 and my business took a 360, just because I was a lot more engaged with people, with the community. So that would be my advice, is whatever it is that a person is working on, give yourself that chance or give others the opportunity of learning about what you're doing, because there's no other way for them to know if you're not willing to get out. So.
I love that. Well, and I like what you said about that as well, because at first you had to manage your energy, and for people that don't naturally love going out, you have to fight for it.
It takes a lot more.
It takes a lot more energy, and then you have to come back and recharge a little bit, and then get up the courage to do it again. That's great advice.
And I still have to today. It's just, I've seen the benefit of going and interacting with people, and I'm willing to pay the price.
Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Well, if I could raise a glass to
Oh.
you, and even though you're not
That's a bottle.
having a water, I would say thanks for everything that you do. Congratulations
Thank you.
for owning your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.